Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the worst way you've seen someone duck over their spouse? Ianal. But I have worked for a lawyer who worked divorces. This was his favorite case. Guy was making $150k a year. Gets a Thai mail order bride. Has 3 kids. Dude has an affair. And now decides that he doesn't want a free on-board wife and mixed race kids and initiates a divorce. The woman's only priority is to have custody of the kids. So against her attorney's advice, she's willing to take a deal where she takes a car and gets $1,200 in child support, no spousal support, and $3,000 lump sum from their joint account so she can rent an apartment. There's zero chance that he actually wants custody of the children because he is already shacked up with the girl he's having an affair with. She wanted full custody so bad that she was willing to live with 3 kids in a modest 2BD apartment and pull the kids out of expensive extracurricular activities they were doing to economize, as well as getting a crappy survival typo job after being nothing but a housewife since coming to US. One of the kids has some talent in an Olympics event, to the level where she was getting professional coaching lessons. The husband takes it to the front of the judge against the advice of his own attorney, who tells him that he's nuts to turn this down because he doesn't want to give her $3,000 and figures that the judge will decide between what she wants and what he wants, not realizing that there's a formula based on income judges use to determine child support payments. At the court, the judge awards the wife the $3,000 lump sum and $1,700 child support for each kid. So because he didn't want to give his ex-wife $3,000 so his kids could have a place to live, about 50% of his take-home pay is going to his ex for the next 10 plus years. The attorney I worked with was a hard-ass about money who never did anything for free, but this was the one case where he represented the woman for just a nominal fee because he had a justice boner. When I got divorced, my alcoholic wife of 18 years had started another affair. This time with her addictions counselor. My lawyer and I laid a trap for them. Just in case you don't know, intimate relations between a counselor and patient are very frowned upon by the regulatory bodies. And I was more than pissed after putting her through rehab. $25k, which I didn't have to do, only to have her fall back into her old behavior. Shortly before the divorce was finalized, I filed a complaint with the state body licensing health professions. Knowing they were in some peril because of their unprofessional relationship, I had already gotten him fired. She had backed off her exorbitant demands. I paid her a very modest settlement, kept the house, got custody of the 3 tweenage kids, plus got child support. A lawyer naturally included a clause in the divorce where I had to agree to not say anything negative about her lover and their relationship. But the lawyer ducked up and never asked if I had already filed charges and thus didn't require me to rescind them. The lawyer had assumed I was just bad-mouthing them to neighbors and friends, and it never occurred to the lawyer that we were doing much more. When the Board of Health Professions responded to my complaint shortly after the divorce was finalized, I told them that it would take a subpoena to get me to testify. A subpoena trumps a divorce settlement. They were happy to oblige. They stripped his license and placed him on a register of sanctioned health professionals. He never worked again. They were broken a handful of years and she divorced him when the money ran out. In the interim, his mother had died, leaving fair-sized estate. So it took longer than I expected. Oh, and the frosting on the cake was that his wife and I traded notes, notably hotel receipts from the time of their affair, that helped each of us in our respective divorces. Justice was served. Not a lawyer, but hopefully someone else remembers and can help me link. I copyright airing remember seeing a post about this on our Pro Revenge maybe? Anyway, husband has a very nice job. Company exec. 6 figures type of job. Wife is upset that her lifestyle will have to change after they get a divorce. Her lawyer sets up a settlement where the wife is entitled to 25% of the husband's income. Kicker is that the lawyer did not specify which job or any specific amount, just a percentage. Husband knew he had enough in savings and assets that his income wouldn't be a huge deal. So now he happily works minimum wage at sports goods store and she gets a fourth of that. Edit. Letters and obligatory, not a lawyer, but. Snippet of an old post of mine. She fights and will not grant the divorce easily. So I do the most sinister thing I can do. I duck her like she ducked that guy. I told her she can keep the house, no issue. She agrees. I bought the house for $323k back when the market was booming. This divorce happened during the recession. The house was valued at $156k. I walked away from it smiling. I knew she couldn't live up to the lifestyle I was giving her. She started falling behind on her payments. Her SUV got repoed. The house was in foreclosure. While I on the other hand went down the road and bought a house worth $500k when the market was high for $212k when the market bubble had blown. TLDR. Walked away from a house during the recession, let her go into debt while I went down the street to purchase a bigger house for less cost of the house I walked away from. A wife negotiated like a biatch possessed for custody of the couple's dog, which the husband, my client, adored. We negotiated the husband's visitation rights for the life of the dog, so she had a vet put the dog down a week after the divorce was final. My mom showed up to the final meeting for my parents' divorce and her last request was to trade cars. My dad had a car about a year newer. She had never driven it and my dad drove 30 miles for work while she drove 3. It was such an odd request, especially since he had given up on most of it. Her lawyer acted off during the conversation and my dad's lawyer said hell no. A few days later my dad gets home to a message from his lawyer. He found out that mom's car had died, needed a new transmission, and she failed to mention that when she offered up the trade. Not the worst, but really ducking shady. Obligatory, not a lawyer but I used to work for the security company, the big one. I had a customer call in and request to have her current deactivation code set as a panic code. A panic code gives the appearance of deactivating the system, but sends a super high priority alarm signal to the monitoring company. This feature exists in case someone puts a gun to your head and demands that you disarm your system. So, if her husband did come by while she was away, violating a court order by my understanding, the cops were gonna show up real ducking fast. Ianal. But my mom's best friend is a family lawyer. Husband and a wife were having a very acrimonious separation. If I remember correctly, he was very successful, and she was going after him for an immense amount of money. She happened to be a multi-prize winning gardener. We're talking about an absolutely exceptional collection of rare and gorgeous flowers, shrubs, the works. After an unsatisfactory development in their divorce proceedings, she came home to find that her husband had ridden their lawnmower over her entire garden, shredding every last stem and leaf into bits. I'm a lawyer but not a divorce lawyer. My sister-in-law is divorcing my brother after 30 plus years of marriage. She's met someone else. So far so normal. It happens, right? The thing that destroyed him is her emptying their son's savings account, which my parents, very far from well off, have paid into once a month for years. That's his uni fund wiped out. I don't know about ducking over your spouse, but it's the one betrayal my brother can't come to terms with. Edit to answer a few questions. So my parents had set up an ordinary child savings account with my sister-in-law as sole trustee. They absolutely trusted her, but unfortunately this gave her complete control over the funds in the account. Legally there's not much we could do. She claimed she thought it was spending money for my nephew for items of clothing, days out etc. Bollocks to that. My parents already spend a fortune on that kind of stuff, and she's clearly spent it all on her new relationship with the unemployed duckwit who also left his wife and 3 kids for her. My parents have always had savings accounts for all their grandchildren, including my own children, and we all knew the money was for the kids to pay uni fees or put towards a deposit on a home or similar. So while she's morally disgusting, I think legally my parents are screwed. One glimmer. She didn't get what she wanted financially in the divorce settlement because my brother's solicitor asked for a provision in the order relating to her repaying the money taken from the account. Faced with having to explain to a judge why there was a dispute over it, she backed down on some other stuff. So my nephew has a new account which my parents have started paying into, and me and my husband are doing what we can too. Meanwhile her life is circling the drain in all sorts of other ways which I personally couldn't give a crap about, except to the extent that my poor nephew is trapped in the middle of it. Sorry for those of you who've been through similar. It's disgusting. Not a lawyer, but this is the history of my house and property. The house used to be owned by a very successful businessman. The property is gorgeous. It overlooks a river and marsh, backed up by thousands of acres of forest and untouched beauty in Wisconsin. Back about 20 years ago, the wife and husband got into a bitter divorce. The wife loved the property. It's beautiful. She loved the river and birds and all the nature around it. So what did the husband do? He, as the owner of the property, deeded it all to nature preserve in the state. Something like 5,000 acres of new public land were created. We the people won. But she lost big time. My house is the only one on the river in that area, but there is now tons of public access points and we all enjoy sharing the land with our community. A former co-worker and his wife had split up, among other things. She took all of his belts from the house. He showed up for work with an Ethernet cable tied around his waist because he didn't have any belts. We worked an early shift so there weren't any stores open before he had to get to work. Used to be a secretary for a family law solicitor. Had this one divorce case where the wife was a teacher of 30 plus years and had a very nice pension. In the divorce settlement it was decided somehow that the pension would be considered as a marital asset and the husband was entitled to 40%. He wanted the money right away and so she had to cash in her pension, so to speak, and had to have a reduced amount. The husband ended up getting around $20,000.00. He was an alcoholic, wasted the money and drank himself to death within 2 years of receiving the money. Obligatory, not a lawyer, but basically what was done to my wife's sister by her now ex-husband. He pretty much just drug his feet on everything to make the divorce take as long as possible. He had a good job making $60 k year and she had a home daycare making about $20 k year. He bled her dry and lawyer's fees. Not a lawyer, but get to deal with the outcome all the time. Client and her ex-husband owned a successful renovation company. Marital issues happen. They decide to divorce. Look at money that is in the banks. Value of the company based on its past. Value of the house. Make an agreement that she gets the company in-house. He walks away with the ready cash. He takes off for a sunny place to start his life Aegean. Turns out husband had been planning to leave her for a while. He stopped paying the vendors and the payroll taxes, which is where the money in the bank accounts originally came from. Company has been existing on credit for over 6 months while he emptied the bank accounts. Employees' paychecks start bouncing within weeks of him leaving, so they quit. Jobs are not getting finished, so customers demand refunds. Within 12 months she is looking for someone to buy the home in a short sale just to get enough cash to close out the payroll accounts before declaring bankruptcy. What's the one where the ex-wife puts the shrimp bits in the curtain rods and then ends up getting the house when they move due to the smell? Not a divorce lawyer, or a lawyer, or a divorcee, or married, or engaged, or have a girlfriend, but I saw the squirrel on my way to class yesterday. I'm sitting in family court right now. I'm a public defender handling some contempt issues, but I have to sit through all the divorce and custody stuff before my cases get called. I just want to say thank you to all of the family lawyers who deal with this shit. I can't even handle watching it. I'll take the horrible crime all day to avoid divorce and custody stuff. My mom works in a trustee's office in KS. She once saw a divorce case between a soldier and a depender. The soldier elected not to get a lawyer and handled it on his own. He specified that he would pay alimony but did not specify that it would stop when she remarried to another soldier. Moral: lawyer up if you divorce. Wasn't there a story on here once about a guy who gifted his house to a friend to prevent his wife getting a share of the sale proceeds? Then the friend refused to give it back. Not a divorce lawyer, but this happened in Nick a number of years ago, and it's just too sweet not to include here. Some dentist or doctor on the Upper East Side and his wife were having a ducking nasty divorce, and she got their gorgeous Upper East Side brownstone, worth several $1,000,000, which pissed him off royally. So the arsehole went into the brownstone, turned on all the gas, let place fill with gas and blew it up, totally destroying the building and killing himself in the process. Turned out the joke was on him, because the now empty lot was worth a ton more money than the house was. So how often is a buyer going to get a prime building lot for a new house on the Upper East Side of Manhattan? The lot was worth about double what the house was. And the wife got it all. Lol. This kinda fits here. My friend's parents were getting divorced and it was super ugly. It went to court due to the accusations being made. Her basis of the divorce was him cheating with the neighbor, who was this stunning 20-something married woman, and the mum wanting half of everything even though she had never worked and lived off the dad. The lawyer's deal was if he admitted he was cheating with woman, things would be split equally and a small sum of money to be exchanged. He had signed this paperwork and it was handed to the court ready for him to sign. He signed it in court but then had a confession to make. Turned out the dad was sleeping with the neighbor's husband. The deal was the woman, not the man. The mum lost everything in the divorce, as did the female neighbor. Dad and male neighbor then moved in together and have been together since. Edit. Mum did not get with the female neighbor. She moved into a friend's house a few doors down and moved to a different place altogether a few months later. Dad and male neighbor moved in together, next door to ex-wife, who then moved her now husband in. They get on really well now, better than ever, and even go for family meals together. I don't know if it is true or if it's an urban legend, but I was told the reason $2 Chuck wine sells for so little is because the owner of the winery and his wife got divorced and she is entitled to half of the profits, so he sells it at cost just to spite her out of any money. Guys, OP is a karma farming bot. Several of the other comments are as well. Proof. It's divorce. Nobody wins. Nobody ducks over the other person without also ducking over themselves. No matter what anyone thinks, you might end up with more money than the other person, or more time with the kids, or whatever, but nobody wins. Everybody loses. Trust me. Source: I'm divorce lawyer. Not a lawyer. I know of a couple where the husband convinced the wife to sell the house and rent and wait till the market cooled down to buy at a cheaper rate. She listened. The day they moved out of the house into rental house, her and the kids were wondering where the husband dad was. She called him and he said, "I'm not moving in." This is gonna be a sad post to read. The lawyer comments: "Not mine. My $2. I'd say that broken engagements are psychologically the most destructive. Partly because no one listens to you unless you use a big D word. Try my years-long experiment. Regularly tried telling strangers the same story using interchangeably the words breakup and divorce and monitored reaction differences. Not hard scientific, but you'll see a definite difference. Point being, when you're engaged, usually at least one person is already mentally married." Not a lawyer, but there was this guy in the UK about a decade ago whose wife was divorcing him. They owned a business together that she was trying to take in the divorce, so he ran up crazy amounts of debt in the business's name and cancelled his life insurance. He then tied a 90-foot cord around his neck and a tree, then proceeded to drive out into the road, decapitating himself in the process. Wife then inherited a bunch of debt instead of his business and life insurance. Didn't hear it from a lawyer, but heard it from a guy who buys storage lockers. There was this lady who was going through a nasty divorce. Her husband had all of her possessions moved into a storage locker. He quit paying for the storage locker and conveniently failed to tell his ex-wife that it wasn't being paid for any longer. My buddy who buys storage lockers said that he saw the lady showing up with police officers in tears at the auction sale after someone else had already purchased the locker, with the police telling her there was nothing they could do, that this is a civil case and she would have to pursue it through the courts. In other words, someone else had just purchased all of her life's belongings and memories for pennies on the dollar. Don't do this kind of work anymore. But honestly, using the kids as weapons during the case. The kids are the only ones who have absolutely no responsibility for the situation. Both adults, to some degree and at some time, made the decisions that brought them to where they are. Also see plenty of incompetence on property settlements. Ask questions and demand inventories. People of Reddit might justifiably end up with a lot of money for your simple efforts on that front. P.S. This is not legal advice and you should consult a family lawyer in your jurisdiction if you have additional questions. Not a lawyer, but I spoke with my friend who is a psychiatrist about this. I guess it's pretty common for wives to accuse their husbands of sexual abuse to their children, boy and girls, if it becomes contentious. Ian, but in my divorce, we agreed to split the dishes silverware 50/50. We entertained a lot. We had a lot of dishes. I was the one tasked with packing my stuff up and moving out. Whenever there was an odd number of something, I would take the odd man out. We had one slotted serving spoon. Just one. So I took it. I received a call later that week from her. Asking about the stupid spoon. I love that spoon now. I use it whenever I can. My wife's first husband screwed her out of her share of his military retirement. She was naive and just wanted it to be over, so she agreed to use the same attorney. They agreed that she would get half of his retirement as part of the divorce proceedings. Agreed mutually. He then went through military channels and had his retirement pay reclassified as a different source of compensation. When they went to court, the judge told her that he clearly violated the intent of the agreement, but that legally, since there was no retirement listed in his payment structure, she got nothing. A woman he was dating during the divorce proceedings told my wife what was going on when they were fighting. By then it was too late. 6 months after the divorce, he bought a house with a built-in hot tub and a brand new pickup. To this day he still takes subtle digs at her about it. I really hope this reaches the front page. I so want to read some stories about this. Not a lawyer either. My parents are going through a divorce currently, and my dad put his hands on my mom, which resulted in me calling the police and him going to jail because she wouldn't pay him for the work he had done on the house. Stuff like putting in a wood stove, tiles, floors, etc. Mind you, she had paid all of his expenses for 10 years because he is an alcoholic and refused to get a job. When he got out of jail, he texted me saying that he was going to take my college fund and get a divorce lawyer so they'd get their assets split 50/50 since they're still considered married regardless of if she has paid for everything or not. So yay. He ducked his spouse and his kid over. Ian, I heard this story secondhand from my mother, but after growing up knowing this woman, I totally believe it. My mom's friend, we'll call her Wiffy, suspected her husband was cheating on her with his ex-wife. Yes, his ex-wife. The one he divorced prior to marrying Wiffy. She hid a tape recorder, it was the 80s, under the couch and caught him talking to his ex on the phone, making plans to meet up and bone. She played it cool. Real cool. Wiffy didn't let on that she knew. She waited till the husband went out of town for a business trip. She changed the locks on the house, took his prized saddle and threw it into the fireplace. She emptied their bank accounts so every check he'd written on that trip bounced. The house was in her name. The husband came back, couldn't get in the house, and found he didn't have $1 left to his name. All she left him was the truck. When they went to court, Wiffy told the judge that since her husband was cheating with his ex-wife, a notorious whore, that she was afraid that she had AIDS. So the judge made the husband keep Wiffy on his health insurance for the next few years so she could get regular AIDS tests. My mother told me that it took the husband something like 8 years to recover financially, all over his ex-wife that he'd already married and divorced once. It's son. I hope the pussy was worth it. Our tales from the law. I'll just leave this here. I've got a few. My single mom is a, now retired, divorce lawyer. So these terrible stories brought food to my table my whole life. One guy comes. Needed a lawyer to divorce her wife who he loved deeply. Apparently in 7 years of marriage they have never had sex because every time they tried her V just clamped up and it was physically impossible. She said it was a psychological issue. Can't remember the name. And he was always understanding and supportive. He was. Until he found a hard drive with videos of her being literally gangbanged every other week. The earliest dated from more or less or and when they got married. One video was even labeled as happening in a city and date where he took her on vacation. Another woman that was super alcoholic and mentally abusive to her children. The day the kids were in court to tell the judge who they would prefer to stay with, the 6-year-old said, "I'm gonna say mommy because if I don't I'm getting the belt tonight." Child services were instantly called. Papa got the custody, but the worst was this crazy dangerous guy that was gonna get half of her wife's assets. So, knowing that his, still mother-in-law, was loaded, he basically tried to kill her so his wife got the inheritance and he would get half of that. Obviously his plan didn't work at all. Now he's in jail for attempted murder and sent the poor old lady to the hospital for weeks. I've got more. Just ask. Also not a divorce lawyer but my co-worker hit the screw over your soon-to-be ex-spouse jackpot. I have a co-worker who rented a pretty nice sized house for his wife and 4 children. He always talked about wishing he could own a house that big for his family but would need to settle on renting for now. He talked about how unbelievable the price was to rent a house that size and how nice the couple was that owned it. Well, that couple who owned the house eventually started going through a messy divorce. The house was in the wife's name and she didn't want the husband to have it. She told my co-worker about the divorce and he thought she was going to say that he had to move because they needed to sell the house. Instead, she asked if he wanted it. He said he was already getting it for a steal for what they charged for rent and couldn't possibly afford to buy it. She replied with, "I will take whatever you think you can offer and it's yours." The wife also knew that the husband wouldn't be cold-hearted enough to fight it either, since it wouldn't look good having a story about him kicking a family out of their home. TLDR. Wife basically gave house to tenants so husband couldn't get it in the divorce. Husband didn't want to look bad by fighting it and kicking a family to the curb. Dad and mom are getting divorced. Dad has a great job and is personally wealthy. Mom is presumed to take the children, age 15 and 17. Offered to split everything 50/50. She comes back and demands a ridiculous amount of dad's personal assets. So, to counter, dad asks for custody of the kids, though he has no desire to have custody of the kids. Mom freaks out and agrees to settle for nothing in return for custody of the kids. Lawyer cooked us up at a firm I used to work for. I once heard the lawyer on the other side brag about he beat my guy because was able to get full custody. My dad has been married to my mom for 37 years. He had a 5-year marriage before her, which ended from an affair. This is how it went. My dad's wife at the time was having emotional problems or anxiety and started seeing a shrink. Weeks go by and she tells my dad she isn't happy and needs time to think and will be staying with her parents. Dad says, "Okay, I love you, we can work through this, blah blah." Anyways, finds out from friends she is staying with her pharmacist. Also note, my dad is still sorta fresh from Vietnam and was a ranger in the army. Old man goes sicko. Goes to the dude's house early in the morning. Knocks on the door. The pill giver answers and my dad physically ruins him. Driving away from the scene and passes the cops. Small town, so my dad knows where they are going. Dad's like, "Well, I better go back or I'll just get leaving the scene too." Goes back and meets the cops and they go, "Who are you?" "I'm the dude who beat the guy up." "Sir, he's really messed up, we are calling an ambulance for him." Starts cuffing my dad. "Why did you do that? My wife's in there." Uncuffs my dad and lets him go. At the time in Minnesota, you can sue somebody for having an affair with your spouse through the loss of love clause. So my dad did. Won big time and with the winnings bought a brand new float plane. Named it Justice. Ian, Albert, a law student, worked for a firm over the summer and one of the lawyers worked a divorce case that he knows as the praying hands case. Divorce is all but finalized, but by the hand of God. There are a couple more issues to deal with. One of them was a picture of praying hands with like a rosary around it. Apparently the divorce was pretty messy and it all just culminated over this picture. Each client paid their lawyers hourly, hundreds of dollars, rates to try to figure out who got this one, essentially worthless picture. Like you could get this thing at any Christian bookstore or whatever. But this apparently went on for over a day. Just two lawyers arguing and negotiating over a worthless picture where they both know it is purely out of spite and a waste of their time. I guess you don't bite the hand that feeds though. Less ducking over the spouse than the kids. But my mom used to work as a family lawyer. She's discussing custody with her client. Who's the husband? Because of many factors, he's not getting primary custody. She's trying to explain this to him, but also that he'll still be able to see his kids and have a place in their life. That his role as a father is still important. She's talking about ways they can challenge the decision and what his recourse is. He's clearly not listening and apathetic. "Alright," he says, "but do I get the motorcycle?" She quit family law shortly after.